welcome back to an episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast with your host, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. We decided that it would be a good time, given that we're in the dead period of the offseason, to take a look at everybody's favorite quarterback for the New York Jets, Sam Darnold. You may recall that we did a similar kind of film session thing with Le'Veon Bell. That got a lot of good feedback, so we decided we should do one for Sam Darnold. Kind of wanted to just make it all things Sam, just kind of where he's at as a player, his biggest strengths, his weaknesses, our expectations for him in 2020, what type of leap will he take in his second year in Adam Gase's offense? Is he the real deal? Is he the franchise quarterback? Should the Jets be concerned about some things? Just kind of the overall Sam Darnold storyline, because I've seen a lot of positive Sam Darnold stuff where it's a lot of, media heads are saying that he's going to have a big 2020 breakout season. I feel the same way. But then there's also been some articles written recently that I've seen where it's, if Sam Darnold doesn't improve, the Jets should move on. And so we kind of just wanted to break it down, look at the film, and obviously Michael has more analytics than anybody else in the game. So he'll break down a ton of Sam Darnold analytics. But before we do that, you can listen to this podcast, just the audio version of it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, but you can follow along and watch the video with us from the Jets X Factor YouTube. So you can see the plays that we're analyzing and talking about. So I guess without further ado, Michael, really quickly, how you doing, man?
I'm looking forward to breaking down some Sam Darnold. It was fun to do the Le'Veon Bell review that we did a few weeks ago, but watching Sam film and we've both been looking at it a ton leading up to this. It's just really intriguing to watch him. His high points are just so high, so exciting, but there's also some things that he really needs to work out if he's going to hit that ceiling. So it's a roller coaster ride watching his film, but it's a fun one because he is so young and he has so much room to grow.
Yeah, I think you pretty much capitalized how Sam Darnold's career has gone. I mean, it's been up and down. Both years he's had, kind of these fluky injuries, especially with the mono this last year. No stability really at coaching, offensive line, or receivers. The Jets have not done a great job as a franchise in building around him and nurturing him. When you look at, what the Browns have done for Baker Mayfield, or, what the Chiefs have done for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, obviously there's different situations, and Darnold was drafted into a pretty dire situation here in 2018, and then the GM that drafted him was bad at his job and got fired. I do believe in what Joe Douglas is trying to do. I think it's probably another year before we can really sit back and say, like, wow, the Jets have done a good job building around him. But I think the 2020 supporting cast should be a lot better than this last one. But yeah, I mean, it's just been up and down, some insane peaks, and then some, head-scratching lows for him. But, coming out, I mean, he was an elite prospect. Some people just forget that he should have been the number one pick in the draft. It was kind of a huge surprise when Baker Mayfield, to some at least, was taken number one. I mean, he was Darnold was only 20 years old, super athletic, great, insane arm talent. And some of the reasons that he succeeded so far in the NFL are still evident in his game. So I guess we should just open it up. Yeah, I mean, obviously his athleticism and his arm help him out a lot, bail him out on a lot of things where his technique and his footwork aren't as refined as you would see in somebody like Deshaun Watson or other top, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, any of those top quarterbacks. He has, some mistakes I guess you could say, when it comes to his footwork and some of his, I guess, reading a defense. He's not really at this point in his career winning games because he's dissecting a defense. I mean, he's winning games because has a phenomenal understanding of space, leverage, the way defenders are moving and where receivers are going to go, anticipation. He just has a great feel for the game. That's what people always say about him, that he has this innate feel for the game. I've heard Dan Orlovsky say this is why Tony Romo thinks that he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just because he has this natural ability that you can't teach, of just understanding the way the game is moving. He's not, necessarily there in terms of his football IQ, but just you can see it that Sam, when he's just playing and not having to think as much, is a damn good quarterback. And we're excited about where he can be. So he's only 22. So let's start off with some of the things that we were saying. Obviously, his athleticism is apparent when you watch him. He has plenty of plays like the one like this where he can just escape a sack, throw off of any platform. And this is a play that goes for 17 yards to Le'Veon Bell. Again, with this Giants one, very similar concept where defenders are trying to bring him down and he can just shake free. There's not many quarterbacks in the NFL that can do that. Michael, kind of what are some of the things that you see when you look at Sam Darnold's just arm talent and athleticism, just kind of the natural things that he brings to the table?
Yeah, I think like you said, he just has a really good innate feel for the game. And even if there are some things from a mental standpoint he can get better at just in terms of field reading and decision making, uh, just as a quarterback, like he's not the best athlete in the world. He's not as fast as Josh Allen or Russell Wilson or Lamar Jackson, or he's not elusive in the open field. But like on these two plays, he just has as a quarterback, he's athletic at things quarterbacks need to do. His movement in the pocket, his ability to make throws. He can do better stepping up in the pocket, but like on these two throws, he's able to his lower body strength and ability to get out of this contact to his legs, to his hips, to that lower area. He's able to get out of that contact and just ability to make throws on the move and manipulate the pocket. That's where he really thrives. He has that sort of feel. And on this play, like he probably should have ran here, but the throw itself is one of the best throws that he's made. Just a beautiful high point throw there for Robbie, who makes a great catch. So from an ability standpoint, physically he has, and you hear all the time quarterbacks get labeled as a guy who can make all the throws, but I think Darnold really does fit that. And we've seen just based on the profile of throws that he's made so far. And that's not even based on his arm strength or anything like that. It's just his touch, his accuracy. We've seen it at all three levels. We've seen it in the middle of the field, left side, right side. So he's shown you all the throws and just the ability to make them even without perfect feet, even without good protection or good receiver play or a good run game, putting him into favorable down and distance situations. So physically, in terms of his arm, it's all there. It's just about getting the consistency up to a better point, but becoming more comfortable in Gase's offense and making the easy plays more often than he has been, because a lot of the times he'll make things harder than they need to be. But plays like this one are part of why the end of the second half of his season was so good. The Jets O-line was not really playing that much better. It wasn't playing better at all in the second half. He still took the highest pressure rate from weeks 10 to 17, but he was 11th in passer rating over that span. And it's because of plays like this one, with Jonathan Harrison just getting completely blown up. Shout out to Alex Lewis for bailing him out there. But plays like this one where Darnold is able to just step up, mitigate the pressure, and make a good play on the move. So his ability to move around the pocket, all of these plays we've seen so far are really good examples of that.
Yeah, I think this is a good play that illustrates just kind of his natural feel for the game and the way, especially in the pocket. I know he has been sacked a lot, but I would say most of that, if not all of it, is due to his offensive line and his receivers not getting separation. He is not really walking into many sacks. I mean, it happens occasionally, but he is pretty aware in the pocket.
He's not a sack taker. Like there are quarterbacks who will take a lot of sacks, like Marcus Mariota. They're Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. Those are guys who will, and not that they're the last two guys are bad quarterbacks, but that's just part of their style. Like they'll take some sacks because they're trying to buy time. Darnold is always trying to avoid sacks and keep the ball moving downfield. So most of the time when he gets sacked, it's because there is a very serious protection breakdown or someone got beaten really quickly. But just in terms of pressure, aside from sacks, just he's taken so much. And he took the highest pressure rate of any quarterback in the league this past season. So it hasn't helped him at all settle into the offense. And the thing that he does need to improve the most is just making those easy throws, making proper reads. And it's hard to do that when, like on this play, even when you're not getting pressured, when plays like that one are happening so often, your internal clock is just speeding up a lot faster than it should be. And you feel like you have less time than you really do. It just makes it hard for a young quarterback to develop dealing with all of that.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about this later in the podcast. Certainly there's some concern about maybe the scars that could develop from his first 2 years in New York and potentially maybe year number 3. Michael and I kind of had this discussion yesterday when we were preparing for the podcast, and we'll keep these same plays rolling before we move to our next topic on this. How much will playing in horrible circumstances that he has played in the last 2 years help him? If he can survive when he has, less than 2 seconds to throw at times, how he's going to be when he has, 5 seconds or 6 seconds to throw in the pocket. Or is that something where you'll develop scars where it's like his even if the protection's there, his clock is just going to be way faster and not anticipating that he has time, So they're and you saw it in the New England game. I think that was big. The seeing ghost game. I mean, you saw how wretched his footwork looked by the end of the game, and it was scary because it was like he looked so good the week before against Dallas, and then what was this quarterback we just saw on Monday? He clearly was flustered. He didn't want to get hit. His footwork was all over the place, and it was important, like Michael said, that he was able to bounce back mentally. And so that kind of leads me to believe that, look, he's young. I think this is only going to make him better. I think facing these tough situations is something that is going to make him a better football player. But yeah, the Jets can't let him get hit as much as he's getting hit. They got to keep him on the field. And 2 years in a row that he's missed 3 games, that can't keep happening. And especially, I mean, I guess the Jets have signed Joe Flacco, so we'll feel a little bit better if he goes down than we did last year. But the Jets aren't going to win games if Darnold isn't out there. The Jets are basically built on the fact that if our offense is going to be good, it's going to be because of Sam Darnold. And yeah, just physically, I mean, he's tough, he's big, and he's hard to bring down. I think Bill Belichick has compared him to Ben Roethlisberger in the way that he is hard to bring down as a quarterback. You saw it the most in that first play, where he oftentimes has defenders falling off of him as he's trying to get rid of the ball. But like you said, he's not a guy who takes a lot of sacks. And I think with an improved offensive line this next year, and hopefully, as long as Joe Douglas is the GM, you're going to see him take much less sacks. I think another thing that's a big strength of his, and we talked about his understanding of space, and these next few plays is a good demonstration of it. He's just very good at seeing kind of how, I would say his ball placement certainly factors into this, but how to lead guys, where the holes in the zone are. Just again, talking about that natural feel. Even if he doesn't necessarily identify complex coverages that well, like on this play, just the way he's able to float it over the linebackers and put it underneath the safeties and put it up for Robbie Anderson. There's not many quarterbacks that do that on a consistent basis. And on this play, the way he's able to kind of contort his body, maybe not the best footwork, but the way that he contorts his body and gives it to Braxton Berrios allows this to not just be a 15-yard gainer. This almost goes the distance and goes for 70 yards. So Michael, when we talk about his understanding of space, kind of what are some of the things that jump out to you on film over these next few plays?
Yeah, I think, like you said, his ball placement and just his feel for some of the things going on is one of his most special abilities. Even if his field reading isn't at an advanced level yet, just his ability to get to from X to Y to Z, just hit one read to the next, even if that isn't quite developed yet, what he can do is be able to just feel out where the defender is, just the positioning between where he is, where his offensive lineman and the pressure is, and then down the field where the receiver and his defender is, and just be able to figure out the right spot that the ball needs to be to give his receiver the best chance to make the play. And if it is a situation where there's a possibility for some yards after the catch, give his receiver the ability to gain those yards, catch the ball in stride, and get yards after the catch. I think that's one of the best things that he does is maximize yards after the catch with really good ball placement. And a few of these throws are good examples. This is a solid one, just feeling out for leading Demaryius Thomas against a pretty tight coverage. If you put that one behind, it's probably getting broken up. This is a great throw, and putting touch on the ball over linebackers is something he does pretty well. There were a few examples of it in that Bengals game, which was one of his most underrated performances. That was one of his worst games statistically, but the Jets dropped a lot of passes, gave up a lot of pressure. He had a lot of good throws in that game. But this throw to Berrios against the Raiders is a really good one in terms of his ability to maximize yards after catch. As I was saying earlier, this is probably the best example. The Jets, they run a fake screen here, and it doesn't really work initially. Berrios gets bumped, but Darnold, and this just goes back to just his feel, even if it isn't like an IQ decision-making sort of thing, it's just an innate thing that he's doing to buy his receiver time. So Berrios gets bumped, but Darnold buys himself a little time, gets outside the pocket, and as you said, the footwork there isn't perfect, but off balance, still leads him in stride, and Berrios is able to get everything that his legs can give him on that play. And then this one against the Jaguars isn't a yards after catch play, but I like this play because it just shows, again, another example of just instantly feeling out the situation, understanding where the ball needs to be, with the defender having inside leverage against Griffin there, putting it on his back shoulder, and it's a fantastic catch by Griffin. But all these throws are great examples of him just being able to feel out instantly what's going on between the defender and the receiver, understanding where the ball needs to go. And these are the types of throws that make a special quarterback. And a lot of quarterbacks that have a lot of arm strength and they could push the ball downfield, they could just put a lot of air under it. They get touted as the quarterbacks that can make all the throws, but it's the ones that have accuracy that are truly the ones that are making the most difference. And Darnold, with his ability to just feel out the leverage between the receiver and the defender, he's really good at doing that, and it leads to a lot of good throws, like this one to Demaryius Thomas. Thomas runs a wheel route. The defender's over top of it, so he's not going to be able to lead him down the field. So what Darnold does is he puts it underneath and on the chest of Thomas, gives him the opportunity to box out the defender and make that catch. So these throws are really good examples of him just having that ability to understand the situation, and then also on top of that, not just understand it, but be able to execute it with good accuracy. This one hits Thomas right on the numbers, and he scores a touchdown. So this is one of his best abilities, and that it's just an example of how if you can, be able to give him more opportunities to do this, not shut down so many plays because of pressure, make him throw from tough situations, 3rd and long, because if your run game is so bad, if you can take all those away and put him in more favorable situations, give him more opportunities to make plays, he's just going to make some plays that other quarterbacks can't make as often because they don't have as good of a natural feel for some of these things. So I really love his ability to read the defensive back, just read the one-on-one battle between the receiver and his defender and understand where that ball needs to go. And this one's just absolutely ridiculous. This is probably his best throw of the year. It's such a tight window to Crowder, but that's what makes him special. His accuracy, his ball placement, and his feel innately to be able to make those decisions and then execute it with pinpoint accuracy.
Yeah, and it's that feel that gives certainly a lot of people confidence that he's going to be good, that he could develop into something, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league or something like that. It's because, it's not something that many quarterbacks have coming to the league. And that's part of the reason why he was such a highly touted prospect coming out. People like to act that, since he was the top QB, that he was the most pro ready, but that was not the case. People were going to draft him for his ceiling. He was very raw as a quarterback coming out of USC, but you had so many of these positive traits that you could, if he goes to the right situation, could really flourish into a guy like Aaron Rodgers, or other top quarterbacks like that. Obviously, the Jets haven't done a great job of it throughout 2 years, but I still think you're seeing the flashes and the stuff that you want to see. I think the other thing that's really big is the second year in Gase's system. I think, obviously Adam Gase does not have many fans of his at this point in his career. He gets clowned on a lot, and most Jets fans want him fired. But I like that they brought him back for this year, because I think the biggest thing for Sam, and I said at the beginning, was when he can just play and not have to think, he has good games. He has good plays. He has good drives when he's just playing. And I think the fact that he's going to have another year in the offense, he's not going to have to be focused on learning the offense or remembering, okay, what route is this? He doesn't have to think about that. He's gone through these plays before. He's seen these route combinations before. In 2019, where it'd be, something where he's looking at a route combination. This happened to him a lot, where he would kind of just look at, he's slower to go through some of his progressions. So he'd be looking at a route combination. He'd be like, okay, X is covered. Then I'm going to look at Y is covered. Okay, then I can go to, and he gets sacked. In 2020, the hope is, okay, X is covered, Y is covered, Z is going to be open. Bam. That's kind of the hope that he can take that step. He may, hopefully that's a trait of being new to a system and being a young quarterback in the NFL. Hopefully that's not a trait of his where he's just naturally just slow at progressions. I think he will get better. And so that's the biggest reason I think you're going to see a big jump. People like to talk about the sophomore jump. But in a lot of the cases, it was because they were in the same system for a second year. Not all the cases, but I think the fact that Sam's going to have a second year in the system, that's where you're going to see the big leap from him as we're watching some of his best plays on the move. And this is probably, when we talk about his feel and the movement and the athleticism, this is something that Gase needs to do more of in 2020, is getting him out of the pocket to throw, because it was very clear. And I will give Gase credit. He did do more of that towards the end of the year. He did realize that Sam's strengths were throwing on the run. He's very good rolling left and throwing, and I don't feel like they did that enough. So I'm hoping to see more of that in 2020. But yeah, these are just some of his best plays. He's a creator. I mean, he's I like the Tony Romo comparison because I see it, because he's very creative and he's at his best when he's just kind of making things happen off schedule. Kind of on this play, he could throw to Berrios, but the way he rolls out and he's able to find Daniel Brown for a big gain. Michael, kind of just speak to his ability on the move and what that can do for the offense, and kind of how Gase should build an offense more around him, because that was the other thing I felt that Gase could do a better job of is, when Darnold came out, we talked about how raw he was as a prospect. I don't think the Jets have done a good enough job with Jeremy Bates or Adam Gase in building an offense to Sam's strengths. I think, as I said, they did a better job of it in the second half of the season, and certainly after the supposed meeting after the Jacksonville game, and Sam got to do things that he was more comfortable with. I think you saw improvements in the offense. But if he came into the NFL and had a scheme built around his strengths, the intermediate and short passing, getting him on the move, and preferably a good offensive line, because I think it was a combination of Gase's complex offense and a bad offensive line. And it would led to Sam kind of having to think through a lot of progressions, and then he having, maybe 2.5, 3 seconds to do it. So Michael, just kind of your thoughts on building to Sam's strengths. And obviously the big one is him throwing on the run.
Right. That's a good point. The fact that he didn't get the opportunity to move into his second season with the same coach that he started out with. So in addition to already being the youngest week 1 starter in the history of the league, he also had to start over with a new coach, and this coach didn't do the best job starting out building around him. And it also didn't help that he missed the 3 games in the beginning of the season, and in the first game was pretty physically limited, and it seemed like they built the game plan around that limitation a little bit, or at least Darnold played that way against Buffalo. But still, as you said, in the second half, I think Gase did a better job of molding the offense around Darnold a little bit more, giving him some more freedom to kind of play that street ball sort of game that we really grew to love in the final quarter of 2018. In the second half of 2019, Darnold was near the top of the league, I believe third in percentage of his throws that were at least more than 2.5 seconds after the snap. So he's getting a lot of opportunities to move around and buy some time, which is more his game. Like on plays like this one, a lot of plays against the Ravens, he's moving around. A lot of that mobility we saw in his first season was back in this Ravens game. But even if that one was because of pressure, but still he was rolling out quite a bit in that game and got some more opportunities to do that down the stretch. So Gase did a good job with that. And ultimately, it will come down to, is the offensive line going to allow you to do what you want? Are they going to give you yardage on first down to put you in favorable situations? Are they going to be able to drop back and pass protect and just be able to give Darnold the room to actually operate? So it is going to come down to the personnel, the performance of the O-line a lot. But Gase did a better job in the second half, I think. The results were a lot better. For Darnold, he was playing really well, even though he's taking a lot of pressure. So he did a good job of that in the second half, making more plays like this one that remind you of some of the peaks he showed in 2018. But I love that throw so much against Buffalo. That's really one of his best touch throws of the season, just lofting it over top, hitting Daniel Brown against the sideline. Harrison, again, giving up pressure up the middle. Hopefully,
you don't realize how bad Jonathan Harrison has been until you watch him on film.
When you watch the film, you'll see on a regular basis how much Harrison.
I think some fans like him because back-to-back seasons he's been slightly better than the guy he replaced, Spencer Long and Ryan Khalil. And I was like, okay, well now he's a good center. But it's like, no, if you watch him, and he gets bullied on a lot of plays despite how strong he is.
Yeah, and in that game against Miami in 2018, when Harrison came in and was just throwing regular, normal snaps, I think we all thought he was the next Nick Mangold at that point, just based on that. But yeah, he does show up with a lot of mistakes. Connor McGovern is going to fix that quite a bit this season. But like this play against Buffalo in 2018, this might be the signature play of his career to this point, just showing you his ability to buy time, that make throws on the move, and be able to find Robbie Anderson there. So there were quite a few examples late in 2018, but then in 2019, wasn't quite making as many of those plays early on, but I think he unlocked it a bit more with plays like this one, a design sprint out. And that right there is an example of Adam Gase doing a better job. That one against the Ravens was a designed sprint out towards the sideline. And then this one is just him mitigating Jonathan Harrison. And the point you made about that Bills play earlier, the fact that he passed up on Barrios in the intermediate range. I think that's where Darnold is at. That's where his aggressive mentality adds value. Sometimes you see Barrios coming here across the middle. He could hit that, but he goes for the deeper option. He makes the throw and gives the Jets about 15 more yards than they would have if he went with Barrios there. So there are times where this approach hurts the Jets and he doesn't make this throw. And you look back on it and you say he should have taken the easier throw. But that's an example right there of his aggressive mentality benefiting the Jets. And this is what he does most of the time. He is going to keep his eyes downfield and try the highest upside option available. Sometimes that comes back to bite him, and he has to balance it out a little bit more and not always look for the highest upside option, but the best overall option considering both the chances he completes it and the upside. But that was an example of him making the most out of it, as is this play, which was a really great job of just scrambling and buying time. So his mobility is great, and the more that Adam Gase can emphasize that and let that shine and be a focal point of the offense, the better he's going to be.
Yeah, I get it's his creativity. And I think it's all these things, when we're talking about his feel, his athleticism, his creativity, these are the things that made Sam such an attractive prospect. And it's the reason why I think Jets fans are so high on him, because you see some of these amazing moments where it's like, that's an Aaron Rodgers type of play right there. And I think you're right that it kind of bites him sometimes that he's a bit of a gambler, but I think you do like that your quarterback isn't gun shy. He trusts his arm a lot. It is frustrating sometimes when there's a guy, a running back or, a tight end or somebody staring right at him for a check down at 5 yards, and he decides to throw it, 30 yards down the field into double coverage or something, and then it gets picked off or whatnot. But you do like that he's trying to move the ball downfield, because there are some quarterbacks who come to this league and they're just scared and they play scared. And Darnold's certainly not that. He doesn't play scared even a little bit. And before we move on to, how the Jets haven't helped him a little bit, because this next section, after we've talked about some of Darnold's strengths, we're going to talk a little bit about how the Jets have failed him around him. And then we'll talk about some of Darnold's weaknesses and the things that we want to see him get better at. But yeah, I think one of the things that the Jets do need to do is build to his strengths. Like you saw in that sprint out that you pointed out in the Ravens game, they need to run more crossers, more drags, give him some easy throws early in the game, let him get that feel. But yeah, that's how you get him kind of going in the game. And then once you saw games where he had fast starts and he was able to keep it going, he had good games. And if he didn't really get off to a good start, look at that New England Patriots game, he played a little frozen, I guess. And it's like, if you're going to have that gunslinger mentality that you're always going to push it down the field, you want it to be warmed up and loose. And you saw it in this Cowboys game a lot. This was, I think, his first pass of the whole game. And he hits Demaryius Thomas on a crosser, which again, I think is a route that he's really comfortable with. Because he can see everything. It's easy. It kind of meshes with his strengths. And then in that Cowboys game, you saw him taking a lot of risks on throws, but it was because he felt it. And then in that Raiders game where he has that option where he can run it clearly for like 15 yards, but he instead tries to float it into Robbie Anderson. And that was another good play because he felt it. But you saw him try to make those same type of gambles in the New England game or in the Jacksonville game, and it really didn't pay off for him because he just was cold, I guess. So yeah, let's move forward into how the Jets have failed him a little bit, because the complex offense, I guess, is what I would say. I think a lot of people, I would say, underrate Adam Gase in a way. I obviously don't think Adam Gase is an amazing coach. I think his weaknesses are, I don't think he's, now I'm not in the locker room with him, but he doesn't strike me as a charismatic leader. But I guess Belichick isn't. I also don't think that he is probably a great teacher, and we'll point out why in a second. But I do think that his offense can work. I think you can see, there is a reason why Peyton Manning swears by him. I just think that his offense is very complicated, and it has been tough for, a 21-year-old Sam Darnold who just likes to play more than think, and he's having to think a lot in Adam Gase's offense. But I think you do see times where it's like, oh, wow, that really would have worked out. But it requires a very smart and good quarterback to run the offense. And I think that's also part of the reason why when Luke Falk went in, he was historically bad. But yeah, Gase is not a guy who adjusts well, I think. And I don't think that he is a guy who's, when I say he's not a great teacher, he doesn't do, during that New England Patriots game, I don't think he gave Darnold many, easy gimme throws, trying to get his head back in the game. He kept trying to run some of the same concepts, and it was clear it wasn't working. But I do think that he has a very good offense. And if Sam a very good offense and a complex offense. And if Sam can really nail it down in year 2, I think you're going to see some huge steps. But yeah, as far as how the Jets have failed him, I think particularly in the offensive line, I think that's where it stands out a lot when he has a lack of time. But he's also, his receiving core was not that great. I guess he had Robbie Anderson and Crowder, and he developed chemistry with them. But Robbie's gone. He developed a lot of chemistry with Chris Herndon. He got hurt for the whole year. But like, this is an example, and there's a few examples of this on the season where he's looking for the deep bomb, which is something that he struggled a little bit in his first 2 years, is deep ball accuracy. And, a receiver will slow up. Like you see Demaryius Thomas in this one. Sam Darnold throws it thinking Demaryius Thomas is going to keep running, and, DT slows up and it, falls incomplete. But if he kept running, that would have been a touchdown. You saw it in the Baltimore game here with Jeff Smith, where, again, Jeff Smith was just activated off the practice squad, but Sam rolls out, looks for him, should have had 6 points, but because Jeff Smith stopped, the throws off. And then obviously you could see it with the offensive line too. They bring in an extra guy to block 3 or block 4, and the Jags get there, within 2 seconds. And he has just no chance to succeed. So, Michael, kind of what are some of the things that stand out to you on how the Jets have not built around him, I guess, and have failed him around him? Just kind of giving people who maybe don't watch every Jets game an idea of the circumstances that he's playing on. Because, of course, fans love to give their young star QB plenty of excuses. I think a lot of the excuses are warranted when it comes to Darnold.
Yeah, and it all starts with the offensive line. And to go off what you just said, I think a lot of it is just, as fans, you want to give him excuses because you want to feel like he still has potential to figure it out, that the fact he hasn't broken out so far isn't his fault. And, there's a little bit of that, but most of these excuses are warranted. You look at plays like this, they just happened way too much, in which the protection, both this season and his rookie season, but more so this year, which is crazy because they were bad in his rookie season, but the pressure has just been too much. I said it earlier. He took pressure in the highest percentage of dropbacks out of any quarterback, any qualified quarterback in 2019, over 40%, which is pretty bad. Well, obviously it was the worst in the league, but it hasn't just been the O-line, the receivers too. Both of these plays with Demaryius Thomas and Jeff Smith, and that's just a product of the lack of depth at the position and some of the injuries they dealt with, the poor drafting, the fact that you have a passes prime Demaryius Thomas and Jeff Smith off the practice squad running key routes like that is not going to help Darnold fix some of his issues with deep accuracy. But those 2 plays were not his fault. And this one, this is a terrible play by Darnold. You can't sugarcoat it. But the reason that it turns into such a mess is the fact that Robbie Anderson kind of blows us up on the outside there on the left side. Should be setting a pick, but really blows it. And that leads to the whole mess happening. So just little things. And I think that's a big part of the reason Robbie Anderson, well, both A, wasn't brought back to the Jets, and B, didn't get the biggest deal or as big a deal we expected in free agency. A lot of the little things like that he really struggles with. There's this one play against Pittsburgh in which he's running a short crossing route and he kind of stopped on it and Darnold couldn't complete it. It looked like a bad missed short throw, but it was just Robbie not committing fully to the route. Super talented player. I totally would have brought him back at that price, but little things like that he struggled with. And he's been easily their best outside receiver over the past 2 years for Darnold. So just not a lot of depth at the receiver either. But the offensive line is where it all starts, and that unit has been a big issue. And this is another one this is the one with Thomas, where he slows up in the deep route. So just both the offensive line and the receivers have been issues. Hopefully Perriman and Mims can hit their ceilings and be upgrades over what they've had. It's not a lock. Mims is a second-round rookie, and Perriman has had just one good month in the league. It was a great December, but it was the only good month that he's had since being drafted in 2015. So we'll see what happens there. But the offensive line is where it all starts. You have McGovern. He should be a huge upgrade at center. Mekhi Becton, we'll see how long it takes him if he can be an upgrade right away. But we know how high his ceiling is. Right tackle, you have a huge a lot of upside with Fant and Udoga, but it's big question mark if they can hit it. And then at right guard, hopefully Greg Van Roten can be an upgrade over Winters. But the help hasn't been good for Sam Darnold. And these are just a few examples of plays that look bad initially, but when you look back at it more, there are other reasons beyond Darnold that are just just limiting his ability to make plays. And there have been too many games where he just hasn't had enough of a chance.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is certainly has been more detrimental to Sam Darnold's growth. Obviously he hasn't been surrounded by top tier weapons, but one of the things I think that Gase does really well is he schemes receivers open a lot. I mean, you'll see a lot of pick plays and a lot of concepts that do get receivers open, and that's some of the things that you can see on film that you don't necessarily see when you're watching on when you're just watching the game. Where you're like, Gase actually did have a guy open there. He did do a good job of scheming something that was going to attack this team's weakness. I think the offensive line made it, certainly for a player like Sam, just pretty much impossible to succeed. Because he loves to create. He needs kind of that time to, move around in the pocket, make something happen. That's when he's at his best. And also because he has been, he's a young quarterback, in a new system, a complex system, and he's trying to go through progressions. He's been a little slow at that. And the bad offensive line mixed with that is just a recipe for disaster. But if the Jets get, improved offensive line play, and I think they will, I am excited about the potential for this unit in 2020. I don't think they're going to be, top 10, but I do think they're going to be around the average league mark. And if they can get that for Sam, that means he gets a lot more time to go through his progressions. He has more time to create. That's when I think you're going to see a lot of Sam's bright spots come out. I'm not as worried about the receiving core. Obviously it's not great again, and losing Robbie is kind of a blow, but he does get Herndon back, which I think is huge. He clearly developed a lot of chemistry with him in 2018. Griffin will be back as well after missing the last few games of the year. And then, I think, Gase wanted fast athletes and hopefully, and because he knows he can scheme them open. And I also really like the potential of a guy like Mims. So I'm not too worried about the receivers. I obviously it'd be nice if Sam had, a prototypical number one receiver that he could go to. You're hoping a guy like Mims can develop into that, or a guy like Herndon, or even, if it's a slot guy, Crowder can be that go-to guy for him. But with the way that Gase schemes open receivers and, clearly just their potential as a unit physically, I'm not too worried about the core. I think having Bell, who's arguably the best receiving running back in the NFL, Herndon and Griffin at tight end, having Crowder in the slot, and then you have the intrigue of Perriman and Mims, seeing what they can bring to the table. I'm not too worried about that. The offensive line is the big thing where if he can just get an improved unit, they don't have to be amazing this year, but if they can just be around that league average, I think you're going to see him take a huge step in addition to some of the things we talked about. So we've talked a lot about what Sam's strengths are. Obviously, he's a good athlete, great arm talent, great understanding of space, and a great feel for the game. And he loves to create. He has, a lot of these positive traits. Let's talk about some of the things that he doesn't do as well and that he needs to improve on in 2020 if he really wants to take the next step. And I think this is kind of a big one when we talked about him going through progressions. And when we talk about that he could have potential scars from playing with a team this bad in the 2019 Jets, this is one of them. And I think you did see him at times predetermined before the play happened where he was going to go with the ball. And part of that might be because he knows, hey, I'm not going to have time. You have to kind of decide it before the snap, and I want to go through as many progressions. But he did develop that a bit of his habit of knowing before the snap, look, I think Robbie's going to have a chance here. I'm going to throw it to him, or I think I'm going to go to Crowder here. This is a good example of it where, Jameson Crowder gets wide open here for what would be a touchdown. But he clearly decided beforehand that he was going to throw to Robbie. If you look at his eyes or his head, because you can't really see his eyes in this angle, his plan going into this play was very clear that he wants to go to Robbie and he wants to move the safety by looking at Crowder to try to draw that safety down and throw it. But he doesn't. He looks right at Crowder, who's wide open, but because he kind of predetermined where he was going to go and how that play was going to happen, he misses a wide open touchdown and nearly throws a pick. But look, he looks right at Crowder, who's wide open, and he does draw the safety, but he also misses the throw because his footwork wasn't there as well. And I think you saw that at times for Sam. I would say that was the biggest thing I think he struggled with, is just just going through progressions and predetermining some plays. As I said, he's better when he can just play and not have to think. And this is one of those scenarios where it could have gone really south for the Jets.
Yeah, and on that play, I think it's a great example of him predetermining a read, and that also can be a byproduct. Like I was saying earlier, even on plays where you're not getting pressured, if you are taking a lot of pressure, it can affect the other plays because you feel the need to get the ball out quickly. because you're not expecting to get good protection. And even on this play, the protection isn't great. Shell gets knocked back into the pocket, allows some penetration into the pocket, and that's part of why Darnold throws a little bit off of his back foot there. And he needs to do a better job of that, being able to stay when he's in the pocket and just has to step up, drive through the pressure when the hits are coming. So that's something he can do better. That would help his deep accuracy. Like on this play, you could see he's just throwing off his back foot. It's a wide base, and he doesn't get enough air under it, and it should have been intercepted. But obviously the main point on this play is the fact that he doesn't hit Crowder, who's wide open up the seam on the left side. And like you said, it just seems like he likes his matchup with Robbie on the left side. He's going to look off that safety, and he gets him, but he has to be able to stand in the pocket and read the field and make sure he's giving every receiver a chance. Because on that play, if he was able to, look at every receiver and consider each of them as an option, he would have been able to hit Crowder easily for that touchdown. But instead, he almost throws an interception. So plays like that, he can get a lot better.
How much do you think? Well, I mean, he does get a little bit of a pass when he first came back, because I think he clearly didn't want to get hit in that Patriots game. And I wonder how much of that was that he was 2 weeks removed from having mono. And if he got hit 3 weeks earlier, he could have died. But yeah, I mean, he's taken a lot of hits in his 2 years, obviously all the injuries, and he fought through more injuries than just mono last year. I mean, I think he had a toe injury. He tore his ligament on his thumb. He had a bruised rib. I think he had an issue with his knee as well. I mean, he took a beating last year, and that was part of the offensive line. And was clearly Joe Douglas's number one priority, was to protect Sam, and hopefully by effect that'll also open up the run game as well. But yeah, it did appear at times that he was just scared to get hit. I mean, I don't think you can question his toughness, because that was one of the things that I think scouts liked about him coming out. And you saw it at times that he does have that grittiness to him, and he can be tough. But yeah, there were throws where he just, it looked like he was, I am going to try to throw this without getting hit, and you throw it off his back foot. When it's like, I mean, sometimes to throw the right ball, you're going to have to step up and you're going to have to take a hit. But it's hard to say that when the guy's getting hit 12 times a game. It's hard to keep stepping up in the pocket. It's one thing if you're protected all game and there's, this one throw, you're gonna have to step up and take a massive hit. But if you're just taking hit after hit and your whole body hurts, it does make sense, a little bit to me that he didn't, that there were times that he would throw off his back foot. It was one of the things that was very scary about the New England game, where it was like, wow, this guy doesn't want to get hit at all. I mean, I don't know the exact. He might not have gotten sacked the whole game. I think that was. I don't want to be wrong.
I think he only got sacked once. I'm not sure, but you're right. He didn't get sacked a lot because
I think, and
that's why he threw so many the 4 interceptions. Because
right.
Oh well, he got sacked on the strip sack.
That was what I was about. The one sack I think.
Other
was
than that,
strip.
I don't think he got sacked. But and it's because what you said. He was just rushing that ball out of there. Had no interest in getting hit at all.
Right. And we'll talk
so you're
about
hoping that doesn't, and it didn't become a habit. I mean, even though he had the 3 picks the next week, he got out of it eventually. And by the end of the season, there were no scars from that game. But you hope eventually, like you said, he's taking a lot of hits, a lot of pressure. So you do cut him that slack. And he was dealing with mono, which could have, again, as you said, could have killed him if he did play during those games he missed. So you do give him those excuses, but at some point you do need him to be a little bit better in the pocket on throws like this one. But there are some other examples where the pressure was more direct and he was going to take a big shot. Just being able to throw the ball, accept a hit, and step up through the contact and be able to put all the power you need into the throw, even if you have to take some contact.
Yeah, here's a good
like
example
this one's another good example.
Yeah, this was probably the most. I walked out of the stadium after this play, but yeah, this was a clear example of him just not wanting to get hit, and it is excusable because he had mono. I think it got better towards the end of the game, end of the year. You saw him take some shots in that Ravens game and stand in the pocket, but this is very clearly like, I don't want to get hit. I mean, the rush wasn't. I mean, he probably had an extra half second there, but he just clearly didn't want to get hit. And then to go back, another play of him kind of predetermining where he's going to go with the football, as you'll see in this play. Again, I mean, he's smart that he can identify these matchups, and he knows what he likes. But he sees, the routes here. It's a 9 route for Thomas. It's a 9 route for Robbie, and then I think Crowder just comes here on a little like in dig, 15 yards in or whatnot. And he just decides before the play that he's going to go to Robbie because he knows that he has one of the top deep threats in the league. He knows he has man coverage, and he wants to throw it to Robbie, but he ignores the fact that, look, this safety is not lined up in the middle. He's lined up on I guess it's the left hash on Robbie's side. I mean, he's playing over the top on Robbie. This is very clear, just cover one. And the fact that if he's going to take a deep shot here, he should go to Demarius. I mean, part of that is that, it's like 80-year-old Demarius Thomas trying to run a streak. That's probably not a high percentage throw. Hopefully when that's Perriman and Mims, he might feel more comfortable going to one or the other. But this is a very clear example where it's Robbie's covered. He does get by him. He's a good jump, but that safety's there. That safety's nowhere near Thomas. And to Thomas's credit, he does get open. And that safety's not making it, 20 yards across the field. Thomas shakes him. And if he just doesn't decide before the snap that he's going to go to Robbie, that if he goes to his progressions a little bit more, and again, part of it's the pressure that his clock has sped up a lot. That's a touchdown to Demarius Thomas. So I think you saw that at times.
Yeah, this one's pretty questionable because there's not too much of an excuse you can make for him. As you said, the safety is already shaded to the boundary side, close to Robbie before the play, and he doesn't move from there. He's moving over to that side to help. They're specifically trying to stop Robbie Anderson over the 80-year-old Demarius Thomas on the other side, and they were doing that a lot throughout the game, and he took a few shots in this Miami game to Robbie that he shouldn't have. So that's not the best decision. If he was going to take a shot there, probably should have went to Demarius, even though, as you said, hopefully having two guys who have really good straight line speed and Mims and Perriman can allow him to feel more confident. But plays like that, you just have to clean that up, even regardless of the pressure or anything he's dealing with. Decisions like that, just a little too over aggressive, not reading the defense as efficiently as he should be able to. And for a fact that he's watched that play multiple times, probably many more than we have, all of these plays. So hopefully he is able to nail that down. But, at some point you figure out some quarterbacks are able to make reads like that on a consistent basis, or even as simple as that one should have been. But some quarterbacks just have that ability to read at an elite level, and some you just find out don't develop that at some point. So hopefully Darnold is not the latter, and he does figure out eventually. Just make some of these progressions, and we can attribute it to the pressure he's dealt with, some of the other obstacles, and he gets his field reading to an adequate level to where it can back up his physical gifts. But plays like that have to go. And the Miami game is a really good game to watch to get the complete encapsulation of his strengths and weaknesses. In the first half, he had some, and in the second half, he made some good throws as well. He had some really good throws in that game, but a lot of decisions like this one, too aggressive, just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So a lot of hot and cold in that home game against the Dolphins in Week 14.
It's a pretty great encapsulation of who he is as a player.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the one who pointed it out to me that it has pretty much everything in it of who Sam Darnold is at this point in his career. Clearly the highs and the lows. I think the good sign for Jets fans, I feel like a lot of Sam Darnold's weaknesses, and we'll go over a few more in a second, are fixable. He doesn't have a glaring issue. I mean, people always point to, interceptions, and I think that's kind of a false narrative because over the last, and you probably have the numbers on this, but the second half of the season, he only threw 3 or 4 picks. And it was the same in his last stretch of 2018. That last month, he didn't throw as many picks. So I think he has cleared up the interceptions. He threw 7 in 2 weeks in the New England and Jacksonville games. So, regular NFL fans think of him as a turnover machine, but that's not necessarily the case. But a lot of his issues are mental or little, things that I think will be helped a lot by being in the second year of the system. I think a lot of the mistakes that he made are stuff that he'll clean up with more experience in the NFL and in the scheme. And then also it's just stuff like his footwork. And I think that is something that you can work on as well. And I know that's something he's working on a lot with Jordan Palmer. He's working on his, deep accuracy, throwing to the right because he struggled on throws to the right, and he specifically throws to that were deep. And a lot of that had to do with his footwork, as you'll see in this Bengals play. As I fast forward through the whole video, try to get to it. But I'll see this play. I mean, he misses a touchdown here because he doesn't fully step up like he should. He had too many arm throws, I would say. And because he has that insane arm talent, I think he relies on it too much. Whereas you want to supplement good technique. He can get away with it. He can throw it from different platforms but it was kind of one of those things where you saw in the Dallas game all these amazing throws off these different platforms. You're like, wow, look at this. I mean, he's just, creating plays. And then the New England game the following week, you saw how sloppy the footwork got. So it's one of those things where you want to see it more like the Dallas game, where it's like his footwork looks good and he's using that creativity and that off-platform ability to supplement, consistent quarterbacking. It can't be every single play you're throwing off your back foot or you're throwing with your feet completely parallel. But yeah, I mean, he certainly struggled in stepping into the bucket and throwing it. And that's why I think a lot of his accuracy issues came from. But anyways, the point was, I think a lot of his issues are fixable. I don't think he has a chronic issue that's something that, some quarterbacks have. I don't think he's going to be that guy. I still have a lot of hope for Sam to develop because we've talked about all the good and the just, absolute elite prospect that he is. And a lot of the bad, I truly do feel like can be fixed. Now, the question is Adam Gase the guy to fix that? I'm not sure yet. But if he doesn't take a considerable jump in 2020, I think you move on from Adam Gase and give Darnold a second chance or I guess it's a third chance because it'll be 3 head coaches, but a chance with a coach who can really mold to his strengths because he's just too elite of a prospect to move on from after 3 years. That was kind of a long ramble there, but Michael, you could talk a little bit more about him and his footwork. How concerned would you say you are about it? Because I would say that is something that was probably his biggest issues would be the progressions. And then at times the feet can get sloppy.
Right. And the footwork is important because that's where you get your consistency from. The talent is in the arm, and that's where you can make some of the throws that he's made. And that's what separates quarterbacks, whether it's arm strength or touch, which is more Darnold's bread and butter. The arm is where you get your talent and his ability to make some of these throws that we've seen. It's great to have that. That's what can separate you and make you a star. To be able to make those throws, it's good to be able to do that. So when you're in those situations where you're under pressure, your lineman got knocked into your lap or you're scrambling, you're against the sideline, and you can't throw from the traditional base, to be able to make those throws, it sets you apart from some of the quarterbacks in the league who are, stuck in the pocket, don't have the ability to make those throws. It helps you mitigate pressure is what it can do. And that if you're able to do that, it really helps your offense because even if your offensive line isn't playing well, you can make up for that. And we saw plenty of that from Darnold during his hot stretches near the end of 2018 and in the second half of 2019. So that's great, but you just can't be doing that all the time because it's hard to maintain. You have to be able to, from a clean pocket, and not only a clean pocket, like this pocket here is pretty clean, but even when the pressure is coming, you have to be able to step up and make the throw under pressure and step through it and be able to maintain your footwork, even if you're going to take pressure. Because if you're adjusting based on the pressure to avoid contact, that's how you're letting the pressure make an impact because they're forcing you to throw in a non-traditional way that is not as consistent as the throw that you practice every single day. So he's got to be more consistent with that. It's definitely something that he can improve. But as you said, it's something that is very fixable and should come with just more repetition. And that one right there, he took some pressure from behind. There's not too much he can do about that. But still, it's something that he can get a lot better with. And the more consistent he gets with it, the better he'll be at executing open throws that he has kind of missed on more than you would hope. And some of the throws that he misses are difficult throws that you can't hit all the time. It's tough to hit these throws 20-plus yards down the field. You're not going to make all of them. If you can make half of some of these deep throws, like this throw, for example, like if you can make that 40% of the time, that's really good. But on this throw in particular, he has really good protection. Robbie has good separation with just better footwork and just more drive in the lower body, puts more air under that. He could make that throw more consistently because he has missed throws like this one. He did miss a few throws like this throughout the season, but his deep passer rating did move up in the second half into, I believe, 12th best in the league, in that upper half in the second half of 2019 after he had the worst deep passer rating in the first half of the season. So he did show progress in that area, but footwork is where your consistency comes from. If you're able to master that and just sort of like in basketball, the more repetition you get, the more similar your shot is every single time, then the more you're going to make it because it's just about because you can make a basket any way you want. You could throw it backwards. You could throw it a hook shot from half court, but it's about being able to do the same thing every single time. So the better he gets at that with his throwing motion and specifically his lower body mechanics, the more consistent he'll be overall.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point you just made about how, I mean, it's a strength of his that not every throw of his looks the same, but it also can be a bit of a weakness. You want him to have that base that he can, when the pocket's clean, he has the same, perfect technique. And then he can use his kind of off balance, off platform creativity, at times to supplement that, specifically under pressure. Because I think that was going back to some of the throws at the beginning of this video. Part of the reason he's so hard to bring down is not just because he's athletic and he has the size. It's because he can make throws like that. It's like
Right.
Tom Brady can't make that throw. If that pressure was on Tom Brady, he's going down for the safety. And same with this. I mean, there's only a few. I would say Darnold can make this type of throw. Mahomes can make this type of throw. There's only a few guys who can do that. Who's, he's literally getting dragged down by one. Another guy's coming over his face, and then he's literally having to throw it with as he's getting pulled down to the ground. He just has that. I think that's part of the reason he's so hard to bring down is because of those off-platform throws. So it's a strength, kind of like as we talked about earlier with his gunslinger mentality of if he has the short option open and the deep shot is also kind of open, he's always going to go with the deep shot. It's a strength of his that he's fearless, but it can be a weakness. It's one of those things that he just has to tune. And I think that's a thing with a lot of Darnold's weaknesses. And I think they're fixable because he's shown that he can do it. He just needs to kind of adjust the way he plays. He plays like a very talented quarterback who's just very raw. And you're hoping that in year three he breaks it.
Balancing everything. Like you said, it's a great point because he has the talent to make some of these throws in tough situations that a lot of other quarterbacks just don't. But at the same time, you can't be relying on your arm and your upper body all the time. You have to be able to have some solid, consistent base mechanics you can rely on to convert on some of the easy or deep chances that he missed throughout the season and make those consistently. And that's what some of the best quarterbacks in the league do. Like Jimmy Garoppolo, for example, isn't the most gifted quarterback physically. He can't make some of the throws that Darnold can make on the move. But what he does do is when the 49ers get people wide open down the field, which they do a lot because their offense is so good, he takes advantage of it. And that's something that Darnold can get a lot better at, just being consistent, converting on the things specifically down the field, because intermediate and short, he's pretty good at it. But in the deep range, he can get better. And then in terms of his aggressiveness, it's the same thing. It's great that he's keeping his eyes down the field, always taking the best option. That makes his upside so high to the point where he's not Tyrod Taylor, who's just going to check the ball down so he doesn't throw interceptions. Darnold's going to make sure the highest upside opportunity on each play is taken. Like on that play, for example, that was the highest upside play available on the right side there. There were other shorter passes. On this one with the Bengals, he's going to make sure that the best option available is taken. He's not going to scramble for 5 yards when there's a 20-yard pass available. He's not going to check it down when there's a 15-yard slant available. He's going to make sure that you're getting the best chance at maximizing the play. It's just that sometimes the most efficient overall play is not the highest upside one. If there is, like, for example, that Raiders play that we saw earlier, the fantastic throw to Robbie Anderson, that as great as that throw was and a great display of arm talent, the smarter play there is to just scramble and take, because I believe this was a 3rd and 5 or a third and short. So the smart play there is to just scramble and pick up those yards and not attempt this extremely difficult throw that is a very low percentage chance. So, but this is a showcase of just his upside. That was a higher upside play than scrambling. It had, obviously, as it turned out, a lot more potential yardage than him just running 10 yards. But it's about fine-tuning that. Sometimes you want to do this. Sometimes you just want to take the easy play and keep things moving. So a lot of his weaknesses, as you said, are just about fine-tuning it and bringing it down to a middle ground. It's great to be aggressive, but sometimes you should just take the easier play. Like on this one to Crowder, probably should have dumped this off with the motion to the right side. No one follows him. No one covers him. Probably should have dumped that off there. Instead, he scrambles and tries a really tight throw down the sideline. So situations like that, you should just be checking the ball down. It's the best way to keep things moving. This is another one, the interception to Vincent Smith. It's open, but the footwork, again, with the pressure, it's another example of him not being able to step up through the contact and drive the ball outside, which is what he would have to do to complete this throw. And also Crowder underneath was available. So just to go back to the original point, with everything, it's about he has the arm talent, but you can't rely on it all the time. So he's just got to fine-tune that and bring it down to relying on his lower body and being more consistent with that. And then in terms of his aggressiveness, it's great that he wants to make sure that the highest upside chances are being taken advantage of, that he's not a check down king or a scrambler. It's great that he's not that. But sometimes it's smart to scramble. Sometimes it's smart to check it down. So fine-tuning, bringing
especially when you have
everything into
Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, exactly. One of the best check down options in the league.
Yeah, I think, and this is a good. These two plays illustrate a few points. Yeah, certainly that gunslinger mentality. I think the second one, the interception, is more jarring because he does look right at Crowder. I think this was also. I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe it might have been a 3rd and short. And it's just like he looks right at Crowder right here, and it's like nobody's getting. I mean, Crowder's getting that first down. He may get hit.
Yeah, it was 3rd and 2 here.
Right. So that's. I mean, but that's 5 yards. You keep the chains moving. But he doesn't hit it because I guess he likes prospects. Also, the line did break down. Again, Jonathan Harrison gets bullied there. And I think that's another thing that will help is that Connor McGovern can help maintain the integrity of the pocket a lot better than Jonathan Harrison. A lot of times, even if Sam had time, the pocket was, inverting on him. It was like an M-shaped pocket at times where it was coming right up the middle. So he had to kind of scramble out, and sometimes he would scramble out right into a defensive end. If the pocket can be more of a bubble shaped, I think you're going to see a lot more success from Darnold. That's just an example of it. But I think the big thing on these two plays is it just kind of shows that, yeah, he has struggled so far going through his progressions. And again, experience in the system will help that. But this is an example where he's looking right at Rob, and he turns his eyes right as Robbie gets open. Because as you can see, it's just two curl routes and then Crowder coming onto the flat here. And I think Bilal also goes to the flat. And it's like he sees Robbie, and then he turns his head right as Robbie gets wide open. And then at that point, he tries to go back to Robbie, but now he's covered, and the pressure's in his face, and he has to roll out. And he actually almost does complete this throw to Crowder, but it falls incomplete. He actually does a good job in that, leading it to the outside. But it's just an example of that he hasn't been as efficient going through his progressions to this point. It's when he can play, he's good. When he has to think, he struggles a little bit. And like you said, yeah, he could have also just gone immediately to the check down. As soon as he didn't like what Crowder or what Robbie's looking, he could have just dumped it off to Crowder right then. But instead, he's looking to try to still make a good play, and it just falls incomplete. And again, on the interception, it's the same thing where he struggles on his progressions, where he should just be like – he should go to Crowder immediately right there. But instead, he's trying to make that big play happen. And he doesn't really look at how – I mean, Vincent Smith is open, but just again, I mean, it comes back to kind of the footwork, his progressions, his gunslinger mentality. This is kind of all Sam Darnold's weaknesses in one play because he is right that Vincent Smith does get open. A lot of times he is ultimately right about, I guess one of the weaknesses, as we talked about, his progressions. He'll be looking at one side of the field entirely, staring at a route combination because he knows that one of those routes is going to break open. And a lot of times he's right. The problem is that it might take an extra second or two and he gets sacked. And it's like, well, if they're not open right now, he doesn't have the confidence to look to the other side of the field, see if there's anything open, and then come back to it. He kind of just stares and waits, and that's something. But this is a play that could have been completed to Vincent Smith. He could have rolled out, but he trusts his arm a little bit too much. And just kind of struggles, with his progressions of this one. He wants Robbie, but at the point he realizes Robbie's not going to be open in this deep ball, he should just dump it off to Crowder, but instead or throw it to Smith. But instead, the way he moves his body, he has to throw it off his back foot.
It's a combination of a lot of things on this play because I think if the pressure didn't come, he's probably going to complete that to Vincent Smith. It's, the pressure is what makes him throw it poorly like that off of his back foot. And also, if it didn't come, he was about to move over to that progression anyway. And Smith is, he's still open when Darnold attempts his throw. So it's not the worst decision in terms of how open the target is. But what makes it a poor decision is the fact that it wasn't the best decision to make there.
Right. When
you take everything into account, it's 3rd and short. Crowder's wide open there. You have an easy opportunity to move the chains. It's a throw you can make under the pressure, but considering the heat he was under, it wasn't the best opportunity. Just flip his head and then flick it over there without setting his feet. So if he was going to make that throw, he would have to set his feet, drive that ball towards the sideline, which would require him accepting a hit in that situation, which is another thing that he does struggle to do. But at the same time, even though that is what he would have had to do to complete it, you would rather just see him not take the hit and check the ball down and move the chains and keep the drive going. So not the worst decision in terms of field reading because Vincent Smith is open and he does seem very aware of that. But he just should have taken the check down here and should not have tried to throw to the opposite side of the field without setting his feet and under that pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think this play is probably the best play to show somebody when you're trying to talk about Sam Darnold's weaknesses. And it gives you good context with the situation because you're right, the pressure does get through. He does have some time, but it's, yeah, the pocket's collapsing. He trusts his arm way too much. The footwork is off. He doesn't make the right he's a little slow to go through his progressions, and he passes up the easy first to try to go for something bigger, and he gets burned with an interception. I think that this play in particular really, illustrates the issues that he has so far in his career. But it's also a lot of stuff that's fixable. And I will say he trusts his arm, but that is a good ball. It's just, if he could have stepped in, could have thrown it with a little bit more velocity. And then on this play, as you'll see, this is just a great play by Joe Hayden. Darnold thinks it's man coverage, and so he thinks he's going to have, I think it's Vincent Smith. So he thinks it's man coverage. So he thinks he's going to have, as soon as the safety comes down, he thinks this is just a one-on-one and that Vincent Smith is going to be wide open. But again, he doesn't read the field well enough to see that it was actually zone coverage and that Hayden's dropping back. And then it looks like a terrible decision because Darnold actually leads him that way because he thinks it's just a one-on-one. He sees, he knows that Robbie comes on this little dig and he thinks the safety bites on it. And he's like, I'm going to have him wide open. But he just wasn't. He just kind of lost track of Joe Hayden. I mean, again, this is a very forgivable mistake in my mind. I think people watch this and criticize Sam for that. What was he doing? But I actually think in this situation, this is a mistake that I think a lot of good quarterbacks could make. But it's just simple that he just doesn't see Joe Hayden, and he also gets lit up. So I guess he probably didn't think he had enough time.
Yeah,
to
when
really
you
check
rewatch this play, it just looks a lot more. It just doesn't seem like there was much different he could have done. The Steelers play it so well. They create instant pressure with Watt coming through. A terrible job in that stunt by, I think that's Lewis and Qualley on the left side, but still, it's terrible protection, instant pressure
that's
after
not
the
Alex
handoff,
Lewis.
and they only run 2 routes down the field, and they bring the safety down so he can't throw it over the middle to I believe that was Crowder, right? Who went over the middle of the field?
No, it was
Robbie, and then he tries it down the field to Smith's, and then Hayden drops back right into where Smith is, running towards, where Darnold's trying to lead him. So there just wasn't a ton he could have done there. But still, at the same time, you don't like to see near interceptions, or an interception as that should have been. It was overturned. But I guess you could have said maybe he should have just dirted that ball, chucked it at Robbie's feet, but it would have taken a really quick, really smart read. But still, at the same time, I think it's something he could look at and learn from, and maybe be able to read that better next time. But it is still something that better protection could have helped him get more time to make a decision here. But this one looks a lot more excusable than when I watched it the first time, because the Steelers played, especially Hayden, played it so well. But still, it's something he could do a better job of in terms of just recognizing it, understanding there wasn't really a shot, and getting rid of it. But I still excuse it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, what do they have? They have 8 guys blocking, and they can't get Darnold more than 2.5, 3 seconds. That was Qualley who gets burned. Lewis actually does a fine job blocking there. I guess he could have come over a little bit more, but Lewis actually does an okay job. I mean, he's blocking his man, so we can't slander the one remaining guy who's still on our offensive line from that play. I think that's a good point, because they have to block so many. They can only have 2 guys running a route, and it's like he can't throw to Robbie. That's probably going to be a pick, and Vincent could have been open. But you're right. I mean, if he had more time, he could have. Hopefully Robbie could have gotten open over here, or he could have thrown it away, or he could have scrambled. But the big part of this play is because
ultimately, though, it's pretty ridiculous that you put 8 men in protection and you still give up instant pressure.
Right. It's like, hopefully in the future he would be able to have more time and he could scramble out of the pocket and make something. So I think that's a good example. I think you're right. I think this is more on the situation around Darnold. Another good example where people will watch that play and be like, what is he doing? He's interception, machine. But then when you watch, it's like, what else could he have done? I think that's a really good point you made here. I guess we'll wrap up on one of the things that I did like from Darnold, because we'll wrap up talking about, what's next for 2020. What are we trying to see out of him in 2020? What are the things that we want to see him do better, our predictions and whatnot. But one of the things I thought was encouraging was that he does learn from his mistakes. I thought, obviously the seeing ghost game was a hopefully the lowest point of his career ever. It was, absolute nightmarish game. I can't believe I paid, that much money for those tickets. But dealing with the zero blitz and the concept, I forget exactly. I mean, I'm just going to call them ghost defenders. But what the Patriots did was, stacking the box, bringing the safeties down. It's either going to be a zero blitz and everybody's going to go, or some guys are going to, stand and wait and then drop back into coverage. And it confused Sam. I think Bill Belichick capitalized on the Jets' weaknesses and Sam's weaknesses. He knew that Sam was a little bit slow going through his progressions, and Gase's offense is very complex, and that the Jets' offensive line was really bad, and that he was going to confuse Sam and make him think and not allow him to play. And that's what he did. I mean, he made him think. And this is just one of those things where on this play in particular, this is the fumble. He sees the blitz. He's already been hit with it because he threw the interception to start the game. And it's just one of those things where they all come. It is the zero blitz. And his brain wasn't fast enough to be like, I need to hit Crowder, who's wide open at the top of the screen. I mean, look, I mean, he gets hit immediately, but he does have time to throw to Crowder right here. But instead, he tries to make the play to Anderson deep, and he ends up fumbling the ball. But a lot of teams tried to run this throughout the season after they saw this, because this was just, obviously when you're watching Sam Darnold tape and you see this game, you think you see a lot of his weaknesses. But pretty much every team after this game ran this same concept, either the zero blitz or defenders dropping back. And every team, and I think Darnold did get a lot better at facing it throughout the year. He just realized that he's going to have to get the ball out of his hands immediately or throw it away. And this is an example where he knows it's coming. He even sees this corner start to creep up a little bit. And so he knows they're coming, and he just gets the ball out of his hands immediately to Crowder. And he does what he has to do, and they actually end up getting the first down. And so that was one of those things that was a positive for me, because I saw him throughout the season in the Ravens game, even in the Steelers game, and that Bills game, and the Giants ran it, that it was something that he got better at. And I think a lot of his weaknesses, I do feel like there is an opportunity for growth. So, Michael, I guess we should just talk about what are your expectations for Sam in 2020? What are you looking for him to improve on the most? How do you feel about him? How do you feel about Adam Gase? Just kind of your overall sentiment for Sam Darnold in 2020.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you would like to see a pretty significant step forward this season in terms of his production. I mean, you never want the statistics to be the end-all, be-all, but this is his third year now, and he didn't take the biggest step up in terms of not just his production, but that of the offense in his second season. So I think you would like to see a pretty sizable leap in this third season, and this doesn't have to be his ceiling. He's still only 23 years old. 6 months younger than Joe Burrow. He's not until November going to be as old as Baker Mayfield was when he made his debut against the Jets almost 2 years ago now. So what he does this season is not going to be his ceiling, but I do think it is pretty important that he takes a big step up, just based on the fact that he didn't take much of a leap from year one to year two. So if he goes a third year and he's still about the same level player he has been, it would be pretty worrisome, even with everything he's had to deal with. It wouldn't be the end of his career by any means, but I think you do want to see a big step up from him. And I'm not looking for him to be an elite quarterback or even top 10 quarterback this soon. I think he definitely could do that, be in that top 10 range, but I think realistically, I'm just hoping to see him be, in terms of production, around average. And that's just anything across the board, whether it's passer rating, yards per attempt, net yards per attempt, and just the production of the offense overall in the passing game specifically. Around average is what I'd hope to see. If he can get to that, then he should be able to build off of that going forward. And even if he is only a good, solid quarterback, that's something the Jets have not had for a long time, consistently. And you can win Super Bowls and a lot of playoff games, make the playoffs, be competitive with a good, solid quarterback. And he could put himself on the path to be that starting this season if he can be at least average, but hopefully better than that if the offensive line is better. Because you look at how he's produced in games where the O-line is played at least even just average in terms of the pressure rate they've given up. He's played at a really high level, put up, I believe, a 107 passer rating and an 8-3 record in games where the O-line is played at a solid level. I actually think it's 7-1. Yeah, it's 7-1. The Jet only 8 games out of the 26 he started, the O-line has given up a pressure rate below the league average. Jets have gone 7-1 in those games, and the one they lost,
and I believe the one they lost was Green Bay. it was either Green Bay or
Yeah,
Houston.
yeah, it was the Green Bay game. So they've played pretty well when the O-line has been at least even just average. But it just goes to show how rarely that has happened. It just they've not helped him out a ton so far. But when they have, he's taken better advantage of it than most quarterbacks do. Obviously, any quarterback would be better with improved protection, but Darnold has taken it to another level and really taken full advantage of it when they have helped him out. So hopefully he can play at least an average level this season, but I think he's definitely capable of more than that, maybe being in that 10 to 12 range. But in terms of on the field, I think the biggest thing for me is just balancing out his decision-making, not being aggressive all the time, taking the check down when it's the smartest play. He's got some good check down options. You have Bell, one of the best check down options in the league. You have two really good tight ends. Could be one of the better receiving tight end duos with Griffin and Herndon. You have Crowder underneath. He's got plenty of decent check down options. He's got to take better advantage of those and not always take the deepest shot, just sometimes make the easy play. So I think overall I'm hoping to see him be in that 12 to 16 range among all qualified starting quarterbacks in the league. And then on the field, the biggest things you want to see are his lower body mechanics, just being more consistent with that. And that should help him improve his deep accuracy and converting some of the open deep chances that he missed on last year and his rookie year as well. And then his decision-making, just bouncing it out, not being aggressive all the time, but doing it when it makes sense, and then also taking the easy play when it makes sense. Just being able to feel out the situation, be aggressive when you need to, be conservative when you need to, and then mix it up when you need to.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a more efficient quarterback and becoming a more consistent one. I think right now he's been, just kind of an average. And like you said, I mean, I think he's shown that the Jets can at least win with him. He's not really going to hold him back, but he hasn't taken that next step into elevating those around him. He's been just kind of, a lot of the games that have a great opening drive and he's had some great throws. But yeah, I mean, there's still too many 3-and-outs and things of that nature. It's a lot of hot and cold for him. I think you saw more of the hot in 2019 than 2018. I think there was an improvement, but you want to see, I think you will see a big jump in 2020 and him becoming that efficient quarterback who knows that he doesn't need a touchdown on every play. It's okay to throw the ball away. It's okay to take the check down and get 5 yards and come back at it at second down. Because that's going to lead to more touchdown drives. I think he does need to improve a little bit in the red zone. I think and I think that comes back to space because there's less space in the red zone. That's somewhere where he struggled a little bit. So for me, I'm looking for him to improve in the red zone, become more consistent and more efficient, like you said, and capitalizing on the stuff underneath. I'm hoping that the offensive line takes the next step and just can protect him, like you said, at the league average rate. I'm hoping that Gase can mold the offense a little bit more to him, getting him out of the pocket, utilizing him throwing on the run to the left and throwing. I think that's something that he didn't do at all for Sam. It's just I'm excited. I would say that I think he will get a second contract from the Jets because I don't think the Jets have had anybody is talented to play the QB position for them. And as long as he can stay healthy, and that's a big thing because he's missed 3 games each season, so they got to protect him. I think you're going to see a big year for him just because he has that second year in the system and he can play more. And a lot of these mistakes kind of seem a lot like rookie mistakes. And then, when you see the throws like this one against Baltimore, which obviously is my favorite throw of his, it gives you those insane top tier guy type of throw. That's a top 5 quarterback throw. And I like you said, I think if he can get into that 10 to 15 range, where right now I think he's probably more into the 17 to 22 range, or I mean, I'd probably say 15 to 20 right now. If he can just move himself into that next range of quarterbacks, that's what the Jets need. I mean, I really truly think he can. I mean, I think when it came out, and I forget exactly who said this, so I don't want to misquote. It may have been Scott Mason, but Scott may have been quoting somebody. But he basically said that in his rookie year, he may lead the league in interceptions, but in his third year, he may lead it in touchdowns. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing on a lesser scale through Sam Darnold's career right now. Is I think you're going to see the growth the more that he can play and the more that he can become just an NFL quarterback. Taking sacks, throwing the ball out of bounds, taking the check down, not always looking for the big shot. And then when you are presented with the situation, You can use your insane arm talent, your athleticism, your ability to throw off platform, your gunslinger mentality to throw it deep to accentuate your game. But right now, I think Sam Darnold has the highs, but he has too many lows. And I think if you could just turn those lows, if you can get less of the lows and more of the highs, I think, I mean, obviously that goes for any quarterback, but specifically for Sam, because it's just been so hot and cold for him. And I think you saw it specifically in that second half of the sophomore year, that start to temper down. It start to be more consistent. And that's the big thing for him is consistency, efficiency. Those are the two things for Sam. Do you have a stat prediction for 2020, assuming that all 16 games are played?
I think the big thing for him is keeping the turnovers to a lower level. And I know he hasn't been as bad as turnovers as with turnovers as I think a lot of people realize. Like you said, he had 5 of them in one game against New England, so that pumps the numbers up a little bit. In the second half of the season, or his last 8 starts, he only had 4 interceptions. And also he's been good with keeping the ball safe on fumbles. He only had 1 in his rookie season, only 3 this year. And that was
a huge thing.
One of his biggest concerns coming out. So it was really good to see him improve that. So only 4 fumbles lost in 2 seasons. A lot of quarterbacks lose more than that in 1 year. So he's been good with that. So that is an underrated part of his ball security. And the picks he brought to a much lower level in the second half of the season. So overall, I think I would like to see him get his interceptions if he starts all 16 games around 10, maybe. If you can throw about 9 to 11 interceptions, I think that'd be a pretty good number for him. In terms of touchdowns, I think he had 19 and 13 starts this year, so he was on pace to throw probably about a couple more than that, 22, 23. So if he can improve that rate a little bit and maybe put up around in the high 20s, maybe 26, 27, 28, and of course he could put up above 30. I think he definitely has the potential to do that, and maybe on a consistent basis down the line. But for now, just to be reasonable, maybe 28 is a target. That makes sense, and that's still pretty optimistic because it's 9 more than this season, although he did miss the 3 starts. But for a prediction, I think I'll go with 27 touchdowns and 11 picks. And then what's big for me is yards per attempt, more so than yards per game, because you want to look at what he's able to do efficiency-wise more so than volume, because that's out of his control. But what he can't control is what he does with each throw he does get. He's been under 7 both of his first 2 seasons, which isn't good. You'd like to see him be at least around the league average, which is 7.1, 7.2. I think he's going to push above that this year, around maybe 7.4, which would be really solid for him to do that. So if he can get, like I said, high 20s and touchdowns and somewhere around 10 picks, if he starts all 16 games, that'd be a really good place for him to improve to. And then his efficiency is key, pushing that yards per attempt above the league average. And in terms of his accuracy and in adjusted completion percentage, which accounts for his drops, throwaways, things like that, he was in the top 10 last season. So if he's able to maintain that, but also get the big plays up, that'd be huge. His deep accuracy can improve. Like I said, his deep passer rating improved in the second half to the top half of the league after being the worst in the first half. So if he could stay in that top half there, that would be huge as well. But overall, I think he will end up with somewhere around 28 touchdowns, 11 picks, and above average yards per attempt. Hopefully push that passer rating somewhere around 95 in that range. So above average, like we've been saying, if he can finish somewhere in that 10 to 14 range, that'd be a really good place for him to be at 23 years old.
Yeah, I think he will. And like you just said, if he has a successful third year, although it feels like it's been a while and people are questioning, him as the quarterback of the Jets, if by the end of this season and he had a good season, it's like, okay, now the Jets have a legit quarterback and he's only 23 years old. I mean, he's so young. I agree with you. I actually think those are spot on. I mean, if he can throw between that 9 and 11 mark, I think that's a good place for his interceptions. I think you will see it go down considerably because, I don't think he's actually as much of a turnover guy as people make it out to be. Obviously he's a gambler, so he's always going to throw interceptions every season. That's just the nature of his game, but he's not a guy who's like Jameis Winston, who's just blindly throwing it into coverage. That's not his issue. And then, yeah, as far as touchdowns, I do think he can get over 30 this season, but I think you're right. I think that 28 to 29, that's a good target. Um, I think you hit the nail on the head with both of those. Um, yeah, I'm just excited to see him in, a second season in the same offense. The big thing is also just staying healthy, staying on the field, because he hasn't done that. Obviously the mono is fluky, and he displayed some toughness this year, fighting through a lot of injuries. But if the Jets can protect him and give him all 16 games, I think you're going to be see a really good season for Sam Darnold. I'm really excited about it. And I think the big question then would be if Gase stays, because I think if Sam has a good season, you're keeping Gase, and I think that makes a lot of Jets fans groan. But I would like to see – I will say Gase is one of those guys who he's had tremendous luck in the sense of he's won a lot of close games, and that's, luck is on your side until it isn't. But then he's also been unlucky when it comes to injuries, and he hasn't had many I think he's only had like half the games with his regular starting quarterback or something crazy like that. So if he gets a full 16 out of Darnold, and the offense starts to look a little bit more like it did in the second half of the season. Now, again, Gase had they were having great first drives, and then the offense would taper off. If we can see more of the first drive offense with Sam Darnold and Gase, which I think we will, I think Gase will be here to stay. Just the big thing is consistency, seeing more of the Dallas Cowboys version of Sam Darnold and less of the New England Patriots version of it. If we can get more games like that Cowboys game, I think Darnold will be in a really
even
good
though
spot.
that is like an extreme 2-game set, that really is the story of his career, because he's just had quite a few low point games, like the Patriots, like the Bills in week 1, even though you do give him the mono excuse in that game, but he's just been really high and low. The high points have been a lot higher than, someone like Josh Allen. Baker Mayfield has had some high point games as well, but the high points have been really legitimate. It's just the low point games where he's really dragged them down, and he's brought them down since the early part of his rookie season. You look at his last 16 games outside that Patriots game, and it did happen. It's not to act like that didn't. You definitely, you don't want to write that off. It did happen, but still, the last 16 games, other than that Pats game, 25 touchdowns and 10 picks. So, that's a good jumping off point for him next season. And it goes to show that he can keep the interceptions to a reasonable level. But like you just said, if you could see more of the Cowboys games, because he's had so many games like that were actually elite at that level. The Redskins, Giants, Raiders, Cowboys, Texans, Packers. He's had a lot of elite games over the past 16 games since he returned, or past 17 games since he returned against the Bills in 2018 from his first injury as a rookie. He's had a lot of elite performances, and there's just been too many low point performances balancing it out. So if he could just turn some of those really bad performances into just not so good, decent performances, have those be your low point, and then still maintain those high points, that's when he's going to take that next step.
Yeah, I think we haven't seen Darnold take that true jump. I mean, obviously that's the case, but I think people like to judge the sophomore year as the barometer for what a player is going to be, and I think it's going to be the second year in the system. I think year number 3 for Darnold is going to be like, okay, let's see where we're really at, and if it doesn't work out, then I think you fire Gase and you bring in somebody who can build to Sam Darnold, because as I said, I don't think there's any question about it. He's the most talented quarterback the Jets have had in their history of it. I mean, I guess you could say Namath, but in modern day football, it's Sam Darnold, and I don't think you give up on him, even if he has a similar year to 2019. I think he needs somebody who can build to his strengths. But I do think I did see some positive with the Gase offense in 2019. There were good games there where I did think Sam looked really good. But yeah, big word for him is consistency and efficiency. Those are the two things that Sam's got to improve on. But I think that'll do it for.
And as you said on the breakout with year 2, I think a lot of guys recently have kind of changed our expectations a little bit, like Mahomes, Wentz, Goff, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson. All these guys have really brought us to this point where we're expecting quarterbacks to have their big breakout in their second season, but that hasn't been the norm for quarterbacks. That's a new thing. Most of the time, quarterbacks have had very long development curves and not hit their stride until they're 25, 26 years old, have sat multiple seasons. Drew Brees didn't hit his prime until his fourth season in the league, his third as a starter, and he's 25 years old at that point. So they're just before this recent wave of year 2 quarterbacks, that was never the case. There was always a pretty long development curve for quarterbacks, and it was definitely not usual to see 22-year-old, as Darnold was this past season, 22-year-old quarterbacks even starting, even in the league, let alone playing at a high level. So I think a few different guys who have done exceptionally well early in their careers have kind of raised the bar a little bit too high for some other guys who probably have just longer development curves. So hopefully that does turn out to be the case and not just wishful thinking. But I think it's definitely plenty fair to give Darnold some more time, considering what he's dealt with so far and just how young he is.
Yeah, that's a really good point you just made. And yeah, I think he coming out, we knew that he was going to be this raw prospect with these very enticing traits. It just was going to take the right situation to mold him into an elite top-tier quarterback. We'll see if Adam Gase and Joe Douglas can push the right buttons and build the right team and culture around him. But I after collecting all these clips and watching a lot of Sam preparing for this podcast, obviously I was high on Sam, as most Jets fans are, but I'm even higher on him. I really feel like this year's going to be a big year for him. As long as he can stay healthy, that's just the big thing. Just fingers crossed, knock on wood. I'm really excited for 2020, hoping that the season happens. I guess there's still that obstacle in the way, but assuming
Tony Romo said he was going to break out his 3rd season, so there's definitely going to be a season.
And
we know Tony Romo doesn't get things wrong.
Well, that gives me even more optimism, the fact that Tony thinks he's going to break out in his 3rd season. I agree with him. I really truly believe that this is.
Oh, and he said that back in 2018. He didn't just say that.
There we go.
In 2018, he was like, by year 3, I think he's going to be up there.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, if he could just get to he doesn't have to be top 5 this next year, but if he can get to that, 8 to 13, I mean, that's 8's pretty high. I would say 10 to 15 is probably more reasonable, but I'm really excited to see him this fall. You can follow us at CYJ Pod. That's the podcast's Twitter. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania. You can also find this podcast at jetsxfactor.com. That's the best place to go for Jets content. Check it out. Really, really amazing stuff. Michael's been pumping out daily stuff, and this video podcast will be on their YouTube, so you can watch the clips and whatnot. You would already know that if you're listening to it, but we'll have future film sessions like this. We have a few others planned. I assume we're going to do one for Jamal Adams probably next, just because all the buzz around him, talking about what he brings to the Jets, and we'll do one for some other players and maybe even Adam Gase himself. But anyways, I'm very excited about Sam Darnold, and you should be too. That'll do it. Michael, any last words before we depart?
I would just say keep your faith in Sam Darnold. If it has been wavering at all, there's no reason to give up hope just yet. It's very early. He's extremely talented, and I think the Jets are going to support him a lot better. So I would, and also if you can, just try to look at as much film as you can on him, not just broadcast view, because you can learn quite a bit from it. But keep your hope in Sam Darnold. I have big hopes for him.
Yeah, it's hard to beat Sam Darnold, bro, as Darren Orlovsky said. And that's a good point about the film, because I think a lot of NFL fans just look at his stats and think that he sucks because his numbers aren't great. But when you add context and you look at the film, you'll really see that the Jets do have somebody special at QB. Let's just hope that it.
And we have plenty of film on him at Jets X Factor. I did hit the grading on him. I came up with didn't come up with. I grade every single play that he had that he participated in 2019 to get a grade for every single game, and I have a ton of clips from each of his 13 performances. So we have countless, all 22 on him at JetX. So definitely check that out. It really gives you a more comprehensive look with a lot more context at his 2019 season.
All right. Again, thanks for listening or watching with us. Tweet at us. Let us know what you think about Sam Darnold's 2020 campaign. Tweet us your stat predictions, what you thought of the podcast, and what you think of Sam. Hope everybody's staying safe and staying healthy. And let's just hope there's some football in 2020 so we can all watch Sam Darnold break out and dominate.
Allen back to throw again. Throws one over the middle. It's tipped, and it's intercepted. C.J. Mosley's got it. Runs right to the 10. 5. Touchdown. Jones has it taken away by Jamal Adams. And he is in for a Jets touchdown. Pass over the middle in the air. Picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone. Touchdown. There goes Darnold. And Bell. He's doing it all for the Jets.